Hello, Joy friends, and welcome to Once Upon a Storybook for another angel story from the book of In the Arms of Angels by Joan Wester Anderson. Today, our angel story is titled Love for Always. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and those who are crushed in spirit, he saves. Psalms 34:19. It has seemed like a sensible idea at the time, a trip to London to soothe her sorrow. Margot Fallis was a wife and mother of 5 living in Salt Lake City, but she had been born in Edinburgh, Scotland, and had countless relatives scattered throughout the British Isles. This extended family knew that Margot and her husband had recently adopted a baby girl named Brooke, their 6th child, and that unexpectedly the birth mother had changed her mind and taken the baby back. They understood that although Christmas was approaching and Margot had much to do, she needed to mourn. They had welcomed her, wrapped her in a wordless sympathy, given her comfort and space, and eventually put her on the plane home. As eagerly as she had gone, Margot was now counting the hours until she arrived in Salt Lake City. She had been through several time zones since leaving Gatwick Airport 7 hours ago, and she was tired and cranky and ravenous. There was nothing hearty to eat during the airplane ride, so she had nibbled on a salad. She felt shaky, as if she could cry at any moment, and she missed her family. Worse, instead of continuing its straight and reassuring journey across the Midwestern plains, the huge jet had run into bad weather and had circled above Atlanta for almost an hour. Ultimately, the pilot exclaimed that all flights were being canceled. They would land in Atlanta and resume their flight when the fog cleared. It was the worst possible scenario. Margot had spent every cent of English money she still had during her last day in London, never thinking she would need any cash, and she didn't own a credit card at that time. She just didn't believe in them. Now, here I was in Atlanta with thousands of other stranded people, and I didn't have a cent. Nor did the airlines offer any assistance. Her hunger pains mixed with tension and worry as she and the other passengers dragged their luggage down the tarmac to the airline waiting room area. What was she going to do? Margot called her family collect and explained the situation. Afterwards, she found a seat at an unused gate, but as time passed and her hunger increased, she grew restless. Out of frustration, I began to walk around, she recalls. At one point, dragging her luggage along, she went into a restroom and said a desperate prayer. I prayed that the fog would lift, that I wouldn't be scared, and that they would hurry up and let me go home. Tears of frustration spilled down her cheeks, and she let them come. Then, after wiping her face with a paper towel, she walked back to her gate. No miracle had happened. The fog was still a thick gray blanket covering every window. Passengers were curled up on the uncomfortable chairs, some trying to sleep, others reading, a few eating. Margot's stomach rumbled, and she felt close to tears again. Instead, she sat down and tried to think of something pleasant. Only a few moments had passed when a middle-aged man sat down in the seat next to Margot. He smiled at me, she says. He had beautiful blue eyes that sparkled, and neatly combed light brown hair. I made an effort to smile back, but it was obvious how miserable I was. "Where are you headed?" the stranger asked. "Salt Lake City," Margot murmured. "Really? I'm going there too." Had he noticed her weary sadness? His gaze seemed to hold both concern and compassion, and he was obviously trying to cheer her up. We started a nice, easy conversation. He told me his name was Andrew. He never asked my name. But when he suggested we go for a walk, I didn't feel hesitant. For some reason, I felt I could trust him. The pair strolled around the airport, Andrew carrying one of her suitcases, and enjoyed the Christmas decorations and the carols playing through the loudspeakers. Andrew's presence was immensely reassuring. He promised he'd stay with me the whole time and make sure I got on the plane safely, Margot says. She felt strangely calmed by his kind reassurance. He even seemed somewhat familiar to me, but when I asked him, he assured me we'd never met. Margot's hard knot of anxiety and grief began to soften. The hours passed pleasantly. At one point, Andrew wandered off and soon returned with food for both of them. Margot had never tasted anything more delicious than this stale ham sandwich and bottle of water. "We talked about everything," she says, "but mostly about me and what was going on in my life. I found myself telling him all about Brooke and then my other children. He asked about my parents and my adventurous life, living in so many different places. Andrew's reaction to the lost baby was reassuring. He told me I should love the children I had at home and that things like losing Brooke happen for a reason, that one day I might understand it better." Oddly, she thought she might. Her broken spirit, which had caused her such pain for so long, seemed oddly soothed. Finally, 6 hours later, the fog lifted and it was time to reboard the airplane. Margot could hardly believe that so much time had passed. She felt by now as if Andrew were a lifelong friend, and she could hardly wait to introduce him to the family members who would be waiting for her in Salt Lake City. Andrew took her up to the ticket attendant and watched as she started down the ramp. "I'll be right behind you," he called. "Goodbye, Margot." "Goodbye," she called back. Odd. She didn't recall telling him her first name. But she was too tired for thought now, and she collapsed into her seat and fell asleep. She was perfectly safe. Andrew was on the plane. When the plane touched down in Salt Lake City, Margot was almost the first one off. Her family was waiting there, and her children hugged her in welcome. "Wait until you meet the wonderful guardian angel who helped me in Atlanta. He was so nice, and he'll be coming out soon." Margot waited as everyone deplaned, waited until the last passenger had exited. But Andrew never appeared. Puzzled, she led the family to the luggage pickup area, but there was no sign of him there either. Had he changed his travel plans at the very last minute? But no, he had promised he would take care of her. Margot was confused and disappointed. She would not be able to introduce this dear man to her children. The days passed quickly, and one morning Margot's mother phoned. "I just received a package of old photographs from our relatives in Scotland. Come and see." Margot excitedly rushed over. The woman sat down and looked through the photos. Margot's mother pointed out Margot's great-uncle Jimmy, her grandpa Crawford, her great-grandma Geddes, and many more. Then Margot reached into the pile, pulled out a photograph at random, and gasped. Chills ran up her spine. Margot's mother took the photo and looked on the back of it, where the identity of the man was written. "Andrew Donaldson, Shetland Islands, 1897. This was your great-grandfather," her mother said. "Yes," Margot nodded, tears spilling down her face. She knew this man. Even though he had died long before she was born, he was Andrew, the man at the airport who seemed so familiar to her, who had shown her such kindness, compassion, and comfort. Not a guardian angel after all, but a saint doing an angel's work. She would not be alone, he had told her, and now she understood. Where there is love, even across the centuries, there is healing. Margot kissed the photograph. "Thank you, Grandpa Andrew," she whispered. "I love you too." Wow, what a great story. I really struggled with that one to keep my composure while sharing that with you guys. That was a good story. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story, and I look forward to meeting with you next week for another Once Upon a Storybook story. And until then, be joyful, stay crafty in your own way, make your own joyful creations, and look for your own guardian angels. They're out there.